Wow. All-time high Bitcoin. Colin, I think you're starting this off on mute, so you got to unmute yourself. Crazy 111, 100,000, well over 100,000 BTC. Colin, how are you feeling today?
111,000 military industrial complex cuck bucks for one pristine piece of digital real estate. It's a beautiful day, Will. And he said it couldn't be done.
It is.
They said it wouldn't happen, but we made it happen. Bitcoin capital of the world.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So we thought we'd do the news roundup of the mining pod, which we do every week live, just because, it's a special occasion. Why not rip? Nice little intro music there just to hype everyone up. We'll keep it going though. Colin, we got a lot of stories to get through. But first, before we get into it, we wanted to shout out Fractal Bitcoin, the lead sponsor for the mining pod. You will hear more about Fractal Bitcoin later on during this show.
Hey guys, Will here. I want to take a second and talk about Colorado Air Filter, a new sponsor for the mining pod and a major air filter supplier of both small and large Bitcoin mining sites. Colorado Air Filter is currently running a summer sale on their inventory. They have the widest selection of filtration designed specifically for our industry. From roll media, washable filters, pleated filters, and dust screens, install the right filter without throttling your fans. Here's what one recent major miner had to say about working with Colorado Air Filter. Working with Keith and Colorado Air Filter has been a seamless experience from day one. Their filter media consistently meets the demands of our Bitcoin mining facilities, ensuring reliable airflow and equipment protection. Keith is responsive, knowledgeable, and understands the unique operational pressures in our industry. We value both the quality of the product and outstanding service they provide. Reach out for a free consultation. Contact sales@coloradoairfilter.com using code MININGPOD to claim 15% off today.
Colin, let's tee it up with a little Hashprice from our friends over at Hashrate Index and Luxor.
100%. So things are looking up for miners today as Bitcoin marches above 110,000. We'll see if we get a correction here or if it continues to explode upward. But as it stands right now, Hashprice is sitting pretty at $58 per petahash per day. If I was saying, we're saying this before the halving in 2024, this would not be pretty, but considering that we were at like $39 just a few months ago, this is looking pretty good in terms of margins, especially on next generation hardware like the S21. And it also looks like there's going to be a slight difficulty increase coming in about, 10 days or so. Hash rate is still staying range bound between 800 and 900 exahashes though. So right now it's at about 880. It's rebounded slightly over the past few days. But, a Zeta hash is coming a lot slower than I think a lot of people would have expected. And if we look at prior difficulty adjustments, not exactly great, but, 2 difficulty adjustments ago, we had a -1. The last one was pretty minor. So no pun intended there. So we'll see. This difficulty adjustment could turn into the negative if hash rate dips. It set an all-time high of about 926 exahashes a few weeks ago, or maybe that was a month ago now. I believe it was sometime in April. And it kind of keeps oscillating and whipsawing. So not really sure what's going on with that. We've talked about it on the show before, whether or not this is just seasonal variance or if there's something going on in one of the bigger mining hotspots around the world. But as it stands, things are looking up more for miners than they have in recent months. So things are looking up for everything, especially when we look at Bitcoin mining stocks, which we'll cover here shortly.
Yeah, we'll get to our mining stocks in a second. Can you pull up the Bitcoin chart as well? Probably should throw into that at the top.
Yeah.
But, I had too many buttons to click.
Let's get the bullhorn in. I mean, this is beautiful. This is the 3-month chart. Bitcoin up 31%. And if we look at the 5-day, up about 8%. 1 month, 27%. And we're back in the green year to date after a brutal Q1 at about 19%. So shout out to all those who bought the local bottom at 75. And also shout out to those who said the bull market was over.
Yeah, shout out to many people. I had concerns. It's up 30% since Liberation Day. So something to be said there. Let's pull up into Bitcoin mining stocks, which have been ripping, of course, not as much as like the meta planets and the MicroStrategies of the world, but Bitcoin mining stocks are doing pretty well on the daily. I think some of them are maybe trending down a little bit, like 1-2%, but that's just kind of like day-to-day variance. I think the bigger thing is to look at since Liberation Day, how have these Bitcoin mining stocks been performing? if you scroll down a little bit further, this is from our friends over at the Miner Mag.
Yeah.
You can see this nice piece. This is on TradingView as well. If you construct one of these over the last, I think this is a 20-day period they have set here. Oh no, it's since the beginning of April till now. So looking over the last 60 days or so, BitDeer is performing the best, up almost 80%. They've obviously had some good news in there. The lowest is Cango, trading down about negative 10%. But of course, Cango has had a lot of different news, and I think they spooked a lot of investors with the sell-off of shares back in December as well. Overall, though, we're seeing Cipher, Cores, Iron, and many other Bitcoin mining stocks continue to do well. I mean, Mara, kind of the Bitcoin mining stock a lot of people have in their portfolio if they're going to have one, up 40% over this time frame.
Yeah, so one of the takeaways from Wolfie in this, which directionally I agree with, I'm not sure if I agree with on this rally, because we've definitely seen this in the past few months, or rather the last year, with a lot of these miners pivoting towards AI. But he makes the point that we're starting to see some divergence in prices between AI play and pure play miners. I agree with that if you look at the last year of data. Like when a lot of mining stocks were getting crushed, Core Scientific, for example, was the only one that had meaningful moves. But I don't know if that chart tells us this story, because if you look at it, BitDigital is a laggard here. It's the lowest besides Cango. And they are 100%, like they basically don't even have a Bitcoin mining arm anymore. They've got like 1 or 2 exahashes, I think. And they're going all in on AI. Meanwhile, BitDeer, who is signaling that they're going to move towards AI, but does not have anything off the ground yet, is the leader right now. And that could be for a number of factors, not the least of which the fact that they seem to have gotten production for their Seal Miner ASIC line really up and running. But then you have Cipher that, also moving towards AI, but doesn't have anything definitive yet, in terms of operating capacity. And then, Cores is up there as well. But I kind of see a mixed bag here. And I think that maybe less so than investors rewarding AI and HPC miners versus those who are pure play. I think you're starting to see perhaps a little bit of more complex allocation to some of these companies that are really more based on fundamentals rather than hype, right? I think it's telling that maybe someone like BitDigital is a little bit lower, where have been making moves with their AI and HPC line, but their Bitcoin mining operation is suffering because of that. The same thing with Cango. There's been a few things, a lot of uncertainty, but we'll get to them in a second with some positive news on their front. But all that being said, I'm not sure that this chart exactly spells that story, that AI and HPC miners are winning this rally. I actually think it's more of a mixed bag.
I think it makes more sense for both to be trading well. We've had a lot of the AI HPC news lately. The G42 announcement with Trump at the Saudi Arabia investment summit the other week was huge. That, hopefully it definitely boils those bags a little bit, brings us back into the conversation. And there's been so much positive news on the AI front, which we care more about the AI infrastructure side for us. And you see that bleeding into some of these players. But, CoreWeave has been performing better than Core Scientific over the last few weeks. And there's been some people like our friend Penny Ether who are kind of scratching their heads why. And maybe that bit catches up. So I'm actually more inclined to disagree with this article and think that it's more of a Bitcoin-led move here. And you can see that with MetaPlanet and some of these others that are even further out on the edge. Bitcoin mining stocks forever have had that edge where they're a beta play. They go up a lot harder than Bitcoin or down a lot harder than Bitcoin. And it can be a nice place to live if you know how to use that correctly and like hedge your bets well. And then this new class of stocks came in and kind of took that away from Bitcoin miners. And that would be the MetaPlanets, the MicroStrategies, and increasingly a new cohort. And so I think that kind of dampens the bid a little bit. But this is certainly good. No one's upset about this. The last thing I'll note before we turn over from the mining stock angle and get into some more mining news for this week is that we still have a little bit to go. Looking at the BitDeer stock chart just on my phone here, it peaked at January 3rd or so at $26 a share. And now we're trading at $15.35, which is up 160% on the year. Well, almost, it would be like Yeah, well, how is that on the year? Oh, this is on the 1 year chart, but year to date, it's down 32%.
Year to
On the
date, it's
1
still
year,
down
it's up 100.
33%.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like there's still a bit for these Bitcoin miners to reach those all-time highs again. However, like how much do you factor in all-time highs after the Trump inauguration? Because so many things changed, right? We had Liberation Day, we've had all the tariff announcements, we've had tons of uncertainty globally with Israel, Ukraine, etc. So I'm counting this as a win. Bitcoin's all-time high. We'll see how it bleeds into other assets and how things cycle out. But for today, we can just be happy that Bitcoin's back at all-time high, not necessarily our Bitcoin mining stocks. Miners, are you ready to earn more with what you already have? That's what Fractal Bitcoin is for, scaling Bitcoin with Bitcoin using a fully compatible recursive design. In just 7 months, Fractal's hit 18 million users and nearly 2 billion transactions. Fractal's cadence mining reduces up to 50% of your pool fee. No new hardware, no extra energy, and it's easy. FB rewards go straight to your existing Bitcoin wallet address. Over 90% of Bitcoin's hash power is already merge mining Fractal. Get more from the same resources. Start on Fractal today.
Big news for Cango. 2 news items came out of one of their more recent updates that they are moving forward with a purchasing option of 18 exahashes from Bitmain, and also that the sale of their auto financing business, which was their core business before they pivoted to Bitcoin mining, has been approved. So to back up, for those who may not remember, when Cango kind of came out of nowhere last November, they added 32 exahashes in a purchasing agreement for turnkey units from Bitmain that are hosted at a Bitmain site. And they had an optional agreement for an additional 18 exahashes, which they are now exercising, which will take their hash rate up to 15 exahashes, making them one of the largest public miners in the game, if not the largest after that goes through. I'm trying to think if Mara has more. Apologies for not having that information top of mind. But the other big thing was that the shareholders voted in favor of selling Cango's auto financing business for about $352 million to Ursa Alpha, as Wolfie Zhao from Miner Mag writes here, quote, a Cayman Island entity previously identified as being associated with Ant Alpha, Bitmain's financial services arm, end quote. And as Mining Pod listeners know and Blockspace readers know, Ant Alpha is gearing up for an IPO on the NASDAQ sometime this year. There's just this crazy web here of all of these Bitmain proxies and Bitmain affiliated businesses. And, I think the looming question with all of this, and maybe it's not that interesting, or maybe it's just a matter of timing, but why are all of these things coming to fruition right now? And how do they all relate to each other? It's like I said, it's a crazy web, and it's kind of hard to untangle in some regards.
Yeah, I'm pulling up your article here. Antalpha eyes $300 million valuation via IPO. So it's on a roadshow right now. And the most interesting thing for them, of course, is like they're doing this roadshow. I'm going to pull it down because it doesn't look that great. But I think just the fact that you have concurrently 2 large financial transactions going on certainly tells you what's happening in the market. There's an appetite for these more exogenous Bitcoin plays, whether it be a Bitcoin mining lending book service that mostly operates in Asia, or whether it be Cango lopping off its automaking arm and moving into a better place with Antalpha as a part of that. So there's just more appetite for these sort of things than there was 2 years ago. You would never see these things 2 years ago. When I was doing this podcast, just kind of ripping with people 2 years ago during a bear market, very hard to be interested in what was going on. There just wasn't that much of a bid, and people were waiting for moments like this. I know you saw this on the hashrate index side when you're writing for them and with Luxor for the reports. So I would just make that one note that, you wait around 2 years and things get interesting again all of a sudden. The next thing I'd note is just what Cango can be for Bitmain. Obviously, the relationship between Bitmain, Cango, and Antalpha is there. We could spend time describing what that's like, but I think just for your layman and audience to know, there's a connection between all these companies, and Bitmain has been sort of spinning off a lot of its hash rate, especially in North America, and they're able to monetize that hash rate in a different way via capital markets, and it makes it more interesting for them. it also starts to de-risk their main play, right? Where you have like Antalpha with their lending book over here, and it's going to go public in the US. And you have Cango now has a lot of its hash rate in the US. It's over here. Who knows what else happens with Bitmain itself? It seems like they're just going to focus on manufacturing Bitcoin mining units and probably more of this AI stuff as well into the future. And then using discrete entities for all the other sort of tentacles that are out there. Almost a testicles, not what I meant. Let us go to the next story unless you have any more thoughts.
Yeah, just one more thing to piggyback on your point about the timing being right. And it makes sense for Bitmain to divide and conquer with some of these affiliates and partners. You know, Antalpha runs the loan book for Bitcoin mining loans and Bitcoin backed loans. A lot of those Bitcoin mining loans funnel into Ant Pool clients who need to finance ASICs, right? And when you think about where we are in the cycle, to your point, the market is hungry for more exposure to Bitcoin outside of Bitcoin treasury plays and outside of Bitcoin mining stocks. Makes sense that something like a lender for the industry would be, potentially attractive to certain investors, depending on the health of that loan book and the clients that they're servicing. That's, in a lot of ways, a much more attractive business, I would think, than some of these other ones, Maybe, it's tied to Bitcoin mining, right? But you also have the Bitcoin backed loan business. There might be less volatility in some of those revenue streams. And I think it just kind of folds into this broader story of we are starting to see more diversity in the Bitcoin stock world. Exodus is public now, Popular Wallet, Fold went public, Bitcoin services, financial services business. The question that I have is when River public, or some of these other Bitcoin plays, but that's for another show. So we can hop on over to Cipher if you're ready.
I'm ready if you can throw that one up.
All right, let's get Cipher up on the stage. Cipher Mining raises $150 million to accelerate Bitcoin mining shipments. Will, do you want to take lead on this one?
I can grab it from our one of my favorite sites in Bitcoin mining, the Black Pearl. Little fun name here. Cipher raised $150 million convertible notes, just like we saw CleanSpark, Riot, Mara, Iron, and I think some others, maybe even Bitdeer did a convertible note at one point. But here they're using it in order to facilitate delivery of mining rigs a little bit earlier. So they've raised this cash. They get a discount for purchasing these rigs earlier. And then they also did what we saw with CleanSpark the other week, and we talked about on the call here, is that they put an option in there. So they're able to repurchase the Bitcoin at a certain price. And so that for Bitmain, that's nice. Like they get the rigs delivered in what has been continually like a okay market for ASICs, not as hot as it was in 21, certainly, but an okay market. And then for the buyer, they get that optionality with the Bitcoin. Not too much more on this one. There's like some interesting things on like the equity transaction here about like how they did the convertible note, what that means for like the strike price of these things. Probably won't get into that too much. It's also the discount, which is interesting. I think the biggest thing is, Cipher is still plugging away in the Bitcoin mining side of things as they are also developing the AI infrastructure. There was a lot of thoughts around, are they involved with Stargate, the project that OpenAI is working on with many other companies. And that happened because SoftBank invested in Cipher. But as opposed to a lot of the other Bitcoin miners out there that are just like, hey, we're hard pivoting. For example, Bitfarms, they're not purchasing any more ASICs. They're just kind of fulfilling their deployments and really pushing hard on the AI HPC side. We are seeing that Cipher is able to do two things at once, and they are doing both Bitcoin mining and AI HPC. The last thing I'll note is that we had a few different raise pieces this week, which I wanted to talk about. And so I kind of use this as a proxy to get into those conversations. So the other one was Riot extended $200 million convertible or credit facility with Coinbase. So they already had another credit facility. I believe that brings their total above 300 million in credit facilities that are out there. It might even be higher. TLDR, they have a lot of money on credit from Coinbase because they have a lot of Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And I think there was one other one that's escaping me at the moment, but we are going to continue to see these headlines of Bitcoin miners take out huge loans, convertible notes, probably even some more ATMs, like Marathon announced a $2 billion ATM the other week because it's frothy out there. And the last thing I'll note is how interesting it is when you set yourself up to be public. Yeah, you have all these problems. Yeah, you have to do the auditing, the reports. You have these shareholders who might be annoying, but like you have so much more flexibility now. Like it's a lot harder to raise private in some ways. Maybe someone who, works in venture would disagree with me and be like, hey, it's a pretty hot venture market. My understanding, the venture market's still not that great yet. I'm like, actually, we see an ATM, a convertible note, a credit facility roll out. I keep saying last point, but last point, the bigger get bigger. Bride gets bigger. They're able to take out a huge loan. Cipher is able to get bigger. If you have volume, if you have size, a good size market cap, you can do some of these financial plays that a few years ago were only available to a few people within the crypto ecosystem. Bitcoin miners are big enough to be able to take advantage of this.
Yeah, this is something that we covered on a panel that I hosted at Consensus last week with Christian Lopez and Will Levin of Cohen and Company Capital Markets. And one of the questions I posed to them is, what have been some of the biggest shifts in capital markets for Bitcoin and Bitcoin miners? And they touched on a lot of those points. Fact of the matter is there's a lot more capital sloshing around that is chasing this industry, and miners now, as Bitcoin becomes increasingly institutionalized, have more options than they ever had before. It wouldn't be surprising to me to see, more debt-based financing when it makes sense versus the equity financing that they've traditionally favored. And we're seeing that with Riot's Bitcoin facility, with Coinbase, and with some of these convertible notes, which, typically end up actually ending in dilution because the note holders end up the issuers end up converting. But for the time being, at least, it's not directly dilutive. The last thing I'll note about this story that caught my eye was this bit that Cipher secured a 10% discount and BTC Link call option that could offer additional upside. This sounds similar to the CleanSpark Bitcoin option with Bitmain that we covered recently on the Mining Pod and one of the newsletters. Basically, CleanSpark paid for a shipment of ASICs in Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin was actually valued at, I think, 100 or 110,000 per Bitcoin under the contract. And CleanSpark has the option to buy that Bitcoin back. So it actually might be advantageous for them in the coming weeks or months to buy that Bitcoin back and then sell it for a profit. And it sounds like Cipher might have done something similar, although Wolfie doesn't go into detail, probably because Cipher didn't disclose it. And I don't really have anything else to add about that other than to point it out and ask the question. I wonder why Bitmain is offering those terms now and what that signals about their positioning within the ASIC market, if it has something to do with waning demand amid tariffs or other things. So that was just the only other thing that stood out from the story. But if you're ready, we can move on to a Bitcoin mining adjacent story, but one in which the listeners and Bitcoiners love, and that is the ever coveted and often chased state level strategic reserve. So according to this CoinDesk article, Texas moves closer to setting up strategic Bitcoin reserve as bill passes House. So one of the many bills for a strategic Bitcoin reserve that originated in the Senate just passed the House and is now just waiting a signature and a swipe of the pen from Governor Abbott. And this is one of the more, I would say, bullish Bitcoin reserve bills because it, unlike the Arizona bill that ended up passing, which only allows for basically civil asset forfeiture or, forfeited Bitcoin to be appropriated by the state, this Texas bill actually delineates that the Treasury can use some of the state Treasury, or the comptroller over the currency can use some of the state Treasury to purchase Bitcoin or crypto assets with a market cap above $500 million, which currently is only Bitcoin. And it doesn't specify a limit as far as I could tell from the bill, but it allows them to custody it themselves or have a qualified custodian. They have to do a bunch of reporting on profit and loss and all that other stuff. But it's basically a go ahead and buy it if it makes sense. And I think it's one of the stronger ones to come out, and was similar to another bill in Arizona that ended up failing when the governor vetoed it.
Yeah, I mean, big news. We saw the New Hampshire one happen as well. I think that in the Arizona one, and you guys have done some excellent coverage on this, so we should definitely link that article in the show notes that you guys have been kind of populating. And then this website, Bitcoin Laws, is great just to kind of track them. For Texas, I don't know anything specifically around this that actually impacts Bitcoin miners or Bitcoin companies in the state. I think it's just like generally bullish. There are some interesting new legislative pieces going through or have been going through in the spring session in Texas that are definitely notable for Bitcoin miners, specifically around data centers and renewable energy. So we should definitely check in on that. Maybe do a podcast on it here in the future. But yeah, big news. Hopefully this passes. People love the SBR stuff. People think people eat it up, and for good reason, right? This is going to be big. The only thing I'll point people towards is the Bitcoin Season 2 podcast that Charlie did yesterday. I think it came out yesterday, talking about how states need to be buying this to fund their, not necessarily the treasury, but their pensions into the future, because so many states, their pensions are in disarray. I don't think we've seen any states that have bad pension programs really get interested so far. The ones that come to mind are New York and Illinois and California. And I'm not really aware of any SBRs that are going through states that are really struggling on the pension front. It's mostly states that are like...
It seems kind of fitting, right? The more financially prudent the state, it seems like the more likely they are going to accept something like a Bitcoin strategic reserve, whereas the other states that have, massive debt loads and maybe crumbling pension systems don't seem that interested. Yeah. Whether or not that falls upon certain economic illiteracy lines or political lines is kind of for y'all to decide, but
definitely. Okay, last story for the week. On the news roundup, we always rip through things. This is an awesome piece from Charlie Spears over here at Blockspace Media. Plebs eat first, how Parasite Pool plans to disrupt the mining pool model. I'll let you take this one away because you are the editor. I would say it's a pretty cool piece. I got a lot of DMs about this from various people in Bitcoin mining, venture, etc. So if you have not read it, click on the link below in the show notes and give it a read.
Yeah, great. What I would consider seminal coverage from Charlie. There hasn't been that much written about this. And part of the reason why Charlie was so plugged in is because Parasite Pool's founder, ZK, is the ZK of Ordinal MaxiBiz fame and a few other collections that I don't know of. But Parasite Pool is coming out with a novel mining pool payout mechanism. Others have tried a similar payout mechanism, but the exact specifics, as far as I can tell with Parasite Pool, are unique. And essentially what this is it's kind of like a quasi PPLNS and solo mining model. So what would happen with Parasite Pool is if you were mining with Parasite Pool and you won a block, you would receive 1 Bitcoin, while the remaining block reward and transaction fees are distributed amongst other pool participants according to the work that they submitted on that block. So that's hence like the plebs eat first slogan, because even if you don't win it, you're still going to get compensated. But if you do win the block, then you are going to get, more rewards otherwise if you had just been a passive hasher who didn't end up winning the block for the pool. So just to recap, 1 Bitcoin for people who win it. Rest of the rewards distributed to the other miners who did not win the block. And currently, Parasite Pool only has about 5 petahash. It's still in beta, or maybe even alpha, and they haven't really done a proper launch yet. I think they're still testing things. But it also has 0 fees. So it seems like ZK is bootstrapping this with his riches from Ordinal MaxiBiz and a little bit of philanthropy from the Ordinals ecosystem, often raved against by Bitcoin maximalists and filter boys. A few questions looming in my mind for this, though. This is kind of fitting into the larger cultural shift towards pleb mining, right? We've seen things like CK Pool and Solo Pool. We've seen people buying bit axes. Bit axes are kind of like this cycle's Umbrel or Raspberry Pi spin up your own node. That was really popular back in 2020, 2021. And now bit axes are all the rage. A lot of people think that they're doing the network a favor by running them to decentralize it. I hate to be a wet blanket, but you're really not. If you want to solo mine for lottery, that's great. You should definitely do it. But I'm like here to tell you right now, your 1 terahash miner is not really going to do anything to decentralize Bitcoin mining. The question I have, though, because Parasite Pool is positioned within this cultural shift, how sustainable is this? Number one, 0 fees. So ZK is going to have to bump that up. He can't bankroll this forever. The other thing, well, it's not FPPS, so you can stomach the fees more than if you were FPPS, but there are still certain costs involved, right? The other thing, too, is the pleb first model actually going to be sustainable? If I'm hashing and Parasite Pool hits a block once every, let's be generous and say it's once every month. I mean, if I'm not making a proportional share of the 3.125 block reward, then I'm making less than I would be at a PPLNS pool or an FPPS pool. I don't know if that's going to be enough to cover people's costs unless they have extremely low electricity. Now, maybe you net it out and you actually end up winning a block and then it is worth it. But it seems to me like this payout method might run into some issues.
I think it's cool to experiment. I think you have to get a certain percentage of home miners to start doing this. Brains forever was known for having the home mining crowd. Who knows how much a percentage that was actually on their network? If you want to go back through the history books when Riot yanked using Brains and moved over, I believe, to Foundry at the time, maybe another pool. But they were primarily using Brains, and then they decided to move against it after Brains had a bad luck streak for a little bit. And Brains really has had to kind of reorganize the entire company and start focusing on producing chips and focusing on their hashrate product. So, this is a disruptive market. It moves really hard and fast. The other one I'd point you towards is Ocean Pool. Ocean Pool had to have that first year to bootstrap. They had a few miners that they quartered to bring on early, like Barefoot Mining, but it wasn't really enough hash rate to do anything. They want to block after a while, but they raised money in order to compensate and get it out the door. And I think for someone like ZK running this, there's probably that bootstrapping period, and they're going to have to convince some miners to jump on there as well to kind of get it to appropriate hash rate standpoint from a luck perspective. And then even after that, Colin, you bring up a great point. If you're doing that, then you're hoping that not only do you have luck with the Bitcoin network, you have luck within the pool itself that your miner was the one that won, and then you get that Bitcoin reward. So I like the idea. I like the model. I hope a lot of people with BitAxes and other home mining devices pick up on this. But there are certainly some economic constraints that make this a little more difficult. Last note, I really like the way that this is being pitched, though. When you talk about a BitAxe, it shouldn't be, hey, you could win a Bitcoin block. It should be, hey, this is a lottery device. It sits on your desk and you might win $300,000. That's how it should be marketed. And I think that's the way to get these things in front of people. It's a cool way to orange pill. So we love the BitAxe community. I think that's all I have. I do want to shout out the newsletter. Go read it. It's been ripping this week with some awesome pieces from Colin on Bitcoin Pizza Day. Charlie wrote this Parasite Pool. This is Bitcoin content you can't get anywhere else. And next week, we will be doing some pieces on Bitmain. They have their WDMS Summit in Vegas, which typically they launch or announce a new unit. So we will be there writing that up. And then we'll also have some content coverage from Vegas. So drop into the comments below, fill out that survey, hit that newsletter for us, and enjoy your weekend. Long weekend. Got anything, Colin? I'm saving it for you to close out.
Yeah, I do actually. Keep your eyes peeled. 2 p.m. PST, 5 p.m. EST for news on Bitmain's latest Antminer. And if you're in Vegas next week, stop by and say hello. We will be working the Bitcoin mining stage the entire conference. And we'd love to catch up, say hi, grab a beer maybe.